This is for Andrew. So in case you're wondering, all of my friends are apparently dead or non-existent. So this is my audience for today.
Post plunger. Wait, is it a post plunger? It's a post plunger.
So this is the opposed plunger inlet metering pump. It could also be called rotary or distributor style pump. So all this starts at the fuel tank. So you have fuel in the fuel tank. There's a lift pump that supplies low pressure fuel to the inlet side of the transfer pump. And by low pressure, I mean 3 to 5 psi. If you have a tank that is located above the pump inlet, most likely you won't even need a lift pump. So the fuel comes into here, into the inlet of the transfer pump. The fuel output from the transfer pump forces the regulating piston, which is right in here, against the spring, controlling transfer pump pressure to 26 psi during cranking, 40 psi at idle speed. Fuel starts to act on the regulating piston. As soon as we get maximum pressure, which is 90 to 120 psi, pump flow increases and the regulating piston uncovers the regulating slot and dumps the excess pressure back into the intake side of the transfer pump. On the outlet side of the transfer pump, fuel comes up from the outlet of the transfer pump to the annular groove. Annular groove goes all the way around outside of the injection pump. On the outside of the injection pump, the fuel goes to 3 places. 1, the fuel metering valve, which is right here. It goes down to the hydraulic speed advance, which is right here, which advances our timing as our transfer pressure starts to increase. As it starts to act on the plunger inside the hydraulic speed advance, it rotates the plunger in the opposite direction of rotor rotation. It also fills the pump housing where a return check valve regulates it to about 4 psi and then returns the excess fuel to the tank. So in this case, imagine a line coming from here all the way into here, and imagine that this is a fuel tank, not a beer bottle. So anyhow, fuel has to end up in the governor housing. It goes through a calibrated vent wire orifice to get there, which is right here. The pressure drops down from whatever transfer pressure is back down to 3 to 5 psi. That way we don't have equal pressure acting on both sides of the plunger so that we can easily force them apart. Fuel is going to come up to the inlet metering valve. The governor, where was I? The governor is in charge of it. The inlet metering valve rotates through the actions of the governor. The governor flyweight pivots out. As it pivots out, it moves the thrust collar and it rotates the inlet metering valve. The faster the flyweight goes, the more centrifugal force it develops. It starts to overcome the spring pressure put on from the throttle linkage, and it will start to close off the inlet metering valve. Depending on what position this inlet metering valve is in, fuel ends up down in the charge port. As soon as the charge port in the high pressure hydraulic head and the charge port in the rotor align, the fuel jumps that 1 to 3 micron gap, and it comes down to the center of this orifice inside the rotor, and it comes down the center of the rotor. It forces the two plungers apart. As we continue to rotate, the charged port in the rotor comes out of alignment with the charged port in the hydraulic head. The shoes on the end of the plunger start to contact the internal cam lobe. As they contact the internal cam lobes, as they start to get pushed together, the fuel is pressurized. It comes back up the center of the rotor. It can't go out either of these charge ports because they aren't in alignment. It's not capable of pushing its way through that 1 to 3 micron clearance. It has to continue up the middle. It overcomes delivery valve pressure, which in this case is about 300 psi on this pump. From there, it comes up to the discharge ports. As soon as the discharge ports are in alignment, it jumps that 1 to 3 micron gap, and the fuel finally goes out the equal length, heavy wall, seamless steel tubing right to the injector. So, the governor, which is all of this, these are the flow weights, by the way. The governor regulates the amount of fuel injected in relation to the engine speed and load to control RPM and power output. While the engine is operating, the governor senses engine RPM, reacts to RPM changes, and controls the fuel system to adjust fuel metering. The governor controls low idle speed, limits the high idle, and maintains a selected speed by creating a balance between the governor flow weights and the governor spring. So flow weights, and then there's a spring right there. When you're going down a hill, the truck increases its speed. Centrifugal force increases. The flow weights spread out. It adjusts the inlet metering valve so that you get less fuel. You get less fuel because the spring compresses. When you have more load on the engine, when the vehicle slows down with a higher fueling position, you have less centrifugal force. The flow weights go in and the spring decompresses. There really isn't much more to explain. So yeah, I think that wraps us up for today. Have a good one.